Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Translationborne, the show where we talk all about translation, Bloodborne, and the translation of Bloodborne. This time, after all the high-flown concepts from the last episode, I thought we could start in a more down-to-earth fashion. Shoes of Arianna. Shoes of Arianna, prostitute of the Cathedral Ward. A cute product which does not match well with her at all. It's a short description, and one where I think the translation does a great job conveying the essential meanings involved. Yes, it's somewhat circumspect in referring to Arianna as a woman of the night, as opposed to the more literal prostitute, but I find that wording fits Bloodborne's Victorian setting. Also, where my more literal version of the second line hinges on a double meaning of the shoes not matching with Arianna in terms of both fashion and character, the official English focuses instead on the most salient point of the line, which is the contrast between the cute, innocent shoes and their owner. This is a detail that I really like, because it works both psychologically and as a revelation that ties in with the theme of things not being what they seem. On the individual level, the suggestion that Arianna liked these shoes for their cute, innocent look feels very human to me. People are more than just one thing, so for me, this line adds a believable idiosyncrasy to Arianna's character, even if the wording in both languages is focused somewhat judgmentally on the inconsistency. Also, on a thematic level, I find it fitting that we have to kill Arianna to discover this aspect of her character, since the cost of uncovering secrets is an idea relevant not only to the game as a whole, but to this DLC in particular. Just ask this guy.
You're a hunter with your sanity, aren't you? Must have taken a wrong turn, then, eh? Well, we're more alike than you think. This is the hunter's nightmare, where hunters end up when drunk with blood. You've seen them before. Aimless, wandering hunters slavering like beasts. This is what the poor fools have to look forward to. So, don't be brash. Turn back before it's too late. Unless you've something of an interest in nightmares.
Nah, I'm more into secrets.
Yes, as it should be. Hunt your beasts and think no more on the secrets of the night. That is the very best a hunter can do. Just don't let the blood intoxicate you.
Wait, did you say something about secrets?
What now? Oh, take my word and turn back before it's too late. Unless, I suppose, you've taken an interest in nightmares.
I sure have.
Oh yes, I see. You sense a secret within the nightmare, and cannot bear to leave it be. As if the spirit of Byrgenwerth lives on within you. Such inquisitive hunters will relish the nightmare. But beware. Secrets are secrets for a reason, and some do not wish to see them uncovered. Especially when the secrets are particularly unseemly.
Yeah, any more to say on that subject?
Beware. Secrets are secrets for a reason, and some do not wish to be discovered, especially when the secrets are particularly unseemly.
So there you have it. Simon here basically just told us that the hunter's nightmare holds secrets some would consider shameful, and that if we press on despite the dangers of doing so, we may uncover them. There's also a direct implication that since Byrgenwerth was all about pursuing hidden knowledge regardless of the costs, their intellectual heirs would be as well. Again, this relentless drive to uncover the truth and the dangers it entails is going to be one of the main themes of this DLC, so I wanted to be sure to point out how it's being set up. Of course, that's not the only thing that's going on, and since this information is coming from a new character, I think it's worth taking some time to analyze his speech patterns and consider how they've been rendered into English. One of the first things that strikes me about the Japanese is how casual and informal it is. Simon not only uses the plain form all the time, he also flips around his sentence construction once to separate out the direct object, which is pretty common in informal speech, but rare when the speaker is trying to be polite. It's also clear from his occasional use of the tamae form as a mild command that he considers himself to be in a superior position. This is reinforced by how he makes frequent use of the particle sa, which gives his statements an air of casual expansiveness similar to the phrase "you see" in English. What's more, he often employs the combination particle kane to make speculative assertions, which is another way he comes off as a know-it-all. Finally, there's a world-weary sarcasm to his reaction when we say we have an interest in nightmares. Even without listening to the Japanese voice acting, it's pretty obvious that "ho, sorewa isn't expressing genuine surprise. Put all that together and you get a disaffected hunter who nevertheless believes in his own abilities, speaks informally, can be sarcastic, and is quick to draw conclusions. It's a tone that I think the official translation absolutely nails. Right in the first 2 lines, he sizes us up in a statement that ends with the rhetorical question, "Must have taken a wrong turn then, eh?" This simultaneously conveys his sense of superiority, his world-weariness, and his sarcasm. Plus, the contraction of must have, as well as the sentence final "eh?" emphasize his lack of formality as well. This consideration of Simon's character runs through the entire exchange, and may have influenced some choices that otherwise might seem puzzling. Take his initial warning to us to turn back, for example. In Japanese, this involves something of a set phrase. I've literally translated it as, "I won't say anything bad," but in practice it has a meaning closer to, "believe me," or "I wouldn't steer you wrong." You can see this in the official English the second time this line comes up, when Simon says, "Take my word and turn back before it's too late." But the initial version of his warning instead simply uses the phrase, "Don't be brash." If we don't consider Simon's character, this might seem like a mistake. However, if we see this as a warning couched in a set phrase that lays out the prudent thing for a new hunter to do from Simon's perspective, it makes sense. At the same time, it avoids repetition if players speak to him repeatedly and ties back to the danger of delving into secrets. Simon admits that the smart move is probably to go back to the hunt and forget about the hidden truths of the nightmare, but at the same time, he's clearly compelled to pursue that knowledge, and he senses that we may be a kindred spirit, willing to disregard even his strongest warnings. Speaking of which, Simon's final admonition also highlights an additional aspect of the official translation that I think is interesting. You may have noticed that my literal version of the first 2 English lines is much shorter than the official one. Now, in terms of meaning, the 2 translations accomplish much the same things. The idea is to use a phrase reminiscent of a cliché while indicating that if we dig into the secrets of the nightmare, we'll encounter resistance from people who want those truths to stay hidden. Remarkably, though, it seems like the translators actually have the luxury here of expressing all that information clearly and in a way that's true to Simon's character. I've done a lot of analysis in past episodes talking about tight character limits and the importance of brevity, yet throughout Simon's dialogue, this appears to be less of a concern. The reason for this, it seems to me, is that the translation team is taking full advantage of the fact that the English language voice acting is used as the default even in the Japanese version of the game. This would allow them to prioritize natural English phrasing in a way they might not be able to with an item description. So for some contrast, let's turn to an interesting example of the latter. Rosmarinus, a special firearm used by the Holy Song Troop, upper level of the Healing Church. Using mercury bullets, which are mixed with blood, as a special catalyst, it continuously releases mist of holy mystery. The mist of holy mystery, which is together with singing voices, is essentially the grace of the stars. O beautiful maiden, might you be crying? Now, there is a lot going on with this item description, including some elements that can only be fully appreciated if you both see and hear this weapon in action. To make that happen, I've reawakened in the Altar of Despair with only the game's sound effect volume turned on. Here's what happens when the Rosmarinus fires straight at the camera. It uses quicksilver bullets to produce a cloud of mist accompanied by singing voices, which is important to keep in mind as we return to the River of Blood and shift our focus back to translation analysis. Rather than open by discussing the Japanese text, though, I want to begin instead with an examination of how the item name may be a play on words in Latin. On the one hand, when you break down Rosmarinus into its roots ros and marinus, you wind up with the meaning dew of the sea. This could explain why it was chosen as the name of an item that produces sacred mist. On the other hand, though, Rosmarinus is an actual Latin word used for the herb that we refer to as rosemary. This makes considerably less sense as the name of a firearm, but some of the cultural associations attributed to Rosemary seem to fit in perfectly with Bloodborne. It's long been used in funerals, for instance, in part because it was thought to improve memory. Plus, it has an extensive history of medical use, including being burned as incense to protect against contagious diseases. All this seems extremely relevant to an organization like the Choir, especially since of the two main church factions, this is the one that's said to consist of people reflecting on Byrgenwerth's legacy. Between the visual image of mist and the cultural associations of Rosemary, then, I think both aspects of this particular item name are utilized to good effect in Bloodborne, and I'm glad that the translators once again chose to transliterate the Latin to preserve these effects. As interesting as I find the item name, though, it's the text on this particular description where the Rosmarinus really stands out in terms of translation choices, because it highlights one of the challenges of working on a game like Bloodborne where the lore is so densely interconnected. This creates a tension between what works best in the immediate context and what might better serve the game as a whole. Take the phrase heavenly blessing, for instance. On its own, I think this translation involves a clever solution to a difficult problem. The original Japanese phrase has a strong biblical nuance of a divine gift bestowed upon its recipients as an act of benevolence, and the English manages to capture this both by using the term blessing and by capitalizing on a double meaning of the word heavenly, which can refer to the sky above as well as to the metaphysical location of heaven. While I find this a brilliant solution to that particular problem, though, it doesn't take into account a possible connection involving the literal phrase of the stars. Since this wording also appears both in the name of the Cosmic Eye Watcher badge and the boss title of Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos, it's important to consider preserving that set of associations in English. Arguably, if Cosmic Blessing had been used instead, it would have helped underline the Choir's reliance on receiving divine aid from the stars, as well as their quest to make contact with the cosmos. Now, personally, I would agree with the translator's decision to convey the immediate meaning of heavenly blessing over the alternative, but it's important to realize there's a trade-off being made here, and it's not the only one. There's a far more significant connection potentially involved in the very last line of this description, though admittedly it's both more complex and more confusing. That's because there are at least two different ways this line could be referring to Ebrietas. The first of these is relatively straightforward, mainly coming from the word musume in Utsukushi Musume. This is significant because Ebrietas' title, Daughter of the Cosmos, is Hoshi no Musume in the original. You can imagine a similar effect in English if Ebrietas' title were instead Maiden of the Cosmos, since musume can be used to refer both to a daughter or to a young woman more generally. Furthermore, while the reuse of one common word doesn't strike me as particularly strong evidence by itself, when taken as part of the phrasing of the Japanese as a whole, I think the possibility becomes more likely. That's because when we first encounter Ebrietas, we find her bent over an altar in a location identified in Japanese as Nageki no Saidan, a more literal translation of which might be Altar of Lamentation. This could imply that Ebrietas is expressing some form of sorrow when we find her, and if that's true, it's not hard for me to imagine a choir member asking themselves the question at the end of the Rosmarinus' description while observing Ebrietas in this location. Of course, none of this works very well in English. For one thing, the question being quoted is different. For another, the use of daughter in Ebrietas' title and maiden in the Rosmarinus' description obscures the most direct aspect of this connection. On top of that, the location name, Altar of Despair, isn't as obviously connected to grief and weeping as Altar of Lamentation. But what if rather than focus on a web of smaller references to Ebrietas, this entire last question was translated as one larger reference? This is the other possibility I mentioned earlier, and it could also explain why this line is included as a quote to begin with. That's because while there's no matching line for this text in any dialogue or other item description, it's possible that some of the Latin lyrics from Ebrietas' theme song are being referenced here. According to a fan interpretation of the words being sung, the Latin phrase "est tu fles quare pulchra" is part of the song, and Google Translate turns this into "Why are you crying, beautiful?" in English. Of course, there are two big caveats I have to mention regarding this potential reference. First of all, song lyrics are incredibly difficult to parse by ear in one's own language, let alone a foreign one. And second, Google Translate is not exactly renowned for its accuracy. There are sure to be mistakes involved with the fan transcription and translation, and we can see this from what happened when YouTube user Antonius Tertius uploaded some Bloodborne songs with official lyrics provided by the producer. Unfortunately, at the time of this video's recording, there are no official lyrics for Ebrietas' theme, so this song reference remains uncertain. However, if this line is meant to be based on the Latin lyrics, that would both explain why it's quoted and completely recontextualize how well the English works as a reference. Again, this is a complex and confusing line to analyze, but let me leave you by reiterating how well I think it encapsulates the unique challenges of working on a game like Bloodborne. If you want to get a sense for how this series fits together, remember that you can expect the Translationborne index linked in the description to be fully up to date within 24 hours. And as always, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for me, I would love to hear them. Until next time then, thanks for watching everyone.